One of our patrons described this as Culpepper's complete herbal with a twist of magic. I think that's pretty much summed up exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Exalted Funeral are pushing this, they're promoting it on Kickstarter. Herbalist's Primer, and I'm really pleased to have with me today the creator, author, illustrator, everything of Herbalist's Primer, Anna Urbanek. Very pleased to meet you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh wow, what a beautiful book. I mean, there's not much else I can say to start off. The moment I saw this campaign, I was just completely floored. Would you like to talk a little bit about the product and what it is you're doing?
Yeah, of course. Well, for those of you who don't know me, because I don't expect you to, my name is Anna. I'm the graphic designer from Double Proficiency studio. My partner and I have been working in the tabletop RPGs for about 2 years now and playing them for much longer. Herbalist Primer is a book I came up with about a year ago, mostly because I was a bit sad during the pandemic, so I started drawing flowers, and from that I was peer pressured by Twitter and my friends to make actually the full book on magical plants. So this is a system neutral guide to real world magical plants. And by real world, I mean the actual plants we have and their magical properties are as they are described in the folklore, in the occult, and in the ethnobotany. So it is a kind of a magical medicinal guide, but it is very much written for the RPG community.
It's such a simple concept, yet there's so much to it. I'm just trying to get my head around how you even started with this an idea. I mean, obviously you started drawing flowers and plants, and this is part of it. Do you actually have, as we say in English, green fingers? Are you a gardener? How did it start?
I come from a very long line of gardeners and herbalists, and my mom's a botanist and my aunt is a pharmacist.
Wow.
So as much as I always wanted to be, a witch or a gardener, I actually have literally zero talent for it in practice, which is why I pursued librarianship and graphic design. And now I made a book about plants because I can't keep a plant alive. I know them in theory. I know everything about gardening in theory, but
theory is pretty much everything that I have to fall back on, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm completely with you on this concept of I know how to keep a plant alive, but maintaining is...
I have trouble noticing that a week has passed if I'm deep at work, so watering flowers is not something I can do reliably. Also, my cats would eat them. So I'm not really that much into gardening in practice, even though I do possess a garden. It's mostly a meadow.
Yes, yeah, and we have something where we are. It's very similar. We have a lot of plants in pots that my other half looks after when the cat doesn't help. And the lawn itself, we have a small area of grass, and we cut it when we need to. And part of that is intentional, actually, for us, because we care about things like bees and pollinators.
Oh, exactly. So yes,
that's one reason why
we did the same thing this spring. So I think we first cut the grass this year about June, maybe July. It was a bit of a hassle, but the pollinators were happy with our flower-filled meadow instead of a lawn. So that's a bonus.
We're moving house. We cut the lawn purely because we knew that we were going to have people looking. The cat was not impressed at all, because we have in this area we have mice and obviously birds and things like that. And it was not anywhere near as fun for the cat.
We have a hedgehog in our garden.
Love hedgehogs; they're great.
Me too.
So you have a family background in botany.
I do.
What about the folklore? Go on.
Oh, I was actually always fascinated both by botany and by folklore and by the occult. I decided to be a witch when I was 7. Nothing really came out of that, but I always thought that that's because I didn't really know Latin grammar, so that's why the spells didn't work, obviously.
Naturally.
So I'm learning Latin.
They're all in Latin.
So I'm learning Latin. Maybe I will get there.
So I saw in the campaign that you mentioned that obviously there are quite a few books that you've drawn from, or occult writings.
Of course.
Did that influence at all the like, you've got 100 or so different plants that you're choosing from? Did that come in part from what you could find from folklore, and then that would inform what you could actually bring into the book, or did you choose plants that you knew that you really wanted to draw and then find folklore about them? How do you take this huge list of plants and bring it down to just 100?
Well, first I went with 100 because it's convenient to roll on a percentile dice. So that was the first step.
I like that.
So there is 100 plants and you can roll on a table to pick one.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a book with like 20 poisonous plants and 20 medicinal and 20 magical, but then I started delving into the folklore and the occult a bit more, and I realized this kind of a split is absolutely impossible because everything overlaps and everything's connected because it's nature and not something synthetic created for an RPG supplement. So I ended up basically going through a bunch of ethnobotany books and occult books and old medicinal guides. For example, the cool pepper you mentioned before.
Yep.
And from there, I did pull most of the plants that I wanted to write about due to the amount of pure folklore that is about them. I specifically excluded plants that are mostly spiritual in essence because I didn't feel comfortable exploiting them for entertainment purposes, like peyote, for example.
Yeah.
Because it's not my culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exploit. I'm a Slav, so I'm perfectly happy exploiting my own culture. But
yeah,
it wouldn't be fair.
It wouldn't be good for people to presume that there's some form of misappropriation of cultural heritage, and certainly I think that's really important now more than ever to kind of get that right.
That was actually a quite important part of the whole book writing process because I have decided to make this book completely setting agnostic and it's system agnostic, which meant that I couldn't really introduce any connections to the real world in the general descriptions of the plants. Like, I can't talk about them as hailing from Scandinavia because it's supposed to work in any fantasy world in which there is no Scandinavia.
Yeah.
So the actual descriptions of the plants are setting neutral and you can drop them in any fantasy, but there is a 40-page reference chapter in the appendix in which all of those plants are put in their proper cultural and geographical context. So I don't feel like I'm exploiting something.
Actually,
yes.
I was going to say I have some screenshots. Keep talking, but we have some screenshots just of the
references
here. So,
exactly. That's
I appreciate that.
That is from the reference chapter, and it does give some kind of a deeper understanding of where those plants came from and where the folklore and the legends and the myths came from. And that way you can always trace back whatever I'm writing for entertainment purposes to the appropriate culture that came up with that. Because I wouldn't feel fair just pretending I wrote it. I mean, I did write it, but I didn't always come up with it. So you can always trace it back to the original source.
Superb. That's really cool, actually. And it's quite clear that that this is really a labor of love in terms of something that you're very passionate about.
I just like popularization of science.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really important. And I really love that you're taking a scientific approach to this, even though you're pulling in folklore and kind of herbalism, etc. Which medicinal herbalism, don't get me wrong, it's a science. You require a degree in order to get it, but there is a
this is not a medicinal guide.
No, exactly.
This is a work of fiction.
Exactly.
And while I did put everything I could into making it scientifically viable wherever I could, so the botany that checks out, and the notes on habitat and cultivation and the culinary uses that definitely check out, the medicinal uses as well, as much as I could make them, because obviously there's a lot of ethnobotanical use that hasn't been completely confirmed by science, but has been used for thousands of years. I have notes about that in the references chapter as well, wherever it applies.
Yeah.
Obviously, the magic chapter, the magic part is magic part. So it doesn't really have scientific backing unless we decide that the folklore behind it is the science behind it, in which case it also checks out. Which is also, it's a really cool thing because we managed with our Kickstarter campaign to fund scientific editor. So we have Rishi Masala joining us, and he's an actual plant scientist. He's a plant botanist with many years of experience in popularizing science. And I'm super excited to have him on this project so he can make sure I didn't make a scientific boo-boo.
I saw that. That's just really cool. And I was looking through the artwork as well, and it just feels so accurate. And this is why I made that reference to Culpepper's, for example. It just really reminded me of some of the really kind of technical drawings that you get in them.
Good. They were the inspiration.
And the book itself, if we actually look at it, and I'm really disappointed because, as I said, we're moving house. My other half has a lot of botany books, but they're all in a box in storage. So I couldn't kind of bring one up to compare. But the actual design of the book itself does look like the kind of the botany books that you'd buy for working on your garden, or even from a scientific perspective. I really, really like the layout that you've gone for. It's very realistic.
Yes, it was inspired by 19th century herbals and botany guides. So this is the direct inspiration. I just took that old approach to old school botany guides and moved it slightly into the modern era, so it's easier to use for modern audience, because our ideas about design have changed a bit, not that much, but they did. So I hope this layout will be mostly useful for people, not just pretty. And the illustrations are also inspired by old 19th century botany guides, and they have been referenced from those botany guides, and they have been referenced from public domain photos or photos I've taken myself. So they should be correct. I've made them as correct and as accurate as I could. I do have a lot of photo references for them, so hopefully they will be enough. I wouldn't really advise using them for actual identification of the plants, because sadly many species are highly hybridizing, and there are better tools for identification of the plants available to us these days, like apps where you can take a photo and it gets cross-referenced with thousands of other photos. So that's gonna be more useful than a book. But for RPG purposes, this should be enough.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of variegation between species, and something that looks like one species can be actually something else, really. More and more so as time progresses. You mentioned Rishi Masala has come on board for scientific editing. Now I know Rishi created the Medica Plantarum, which is on the DM's Guild.
Which is actually how I met him. I just seen somebody recommending that guide for me, and I was like, that's the exact thing my book is in.
So where's the crossover between what the Medica Plantarum does and the Herbalist primer?
Oh, with Rishi, we realized that we've been using similar sources only we went with two completely separate directions.
Yes.
His supplement is D&D 5th edition specific. It contains rules for actually playing a herbalist, so you have rules for downtime, for foraging, for creating specific potions. For example, it gives you ingredients based on folklore and the occult, ingredients for all of the magic potions that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if all, but probably right. Yes, because that sounds like Rishi to do a proper job. While my book is mostly an inspiration book, it contains a lot of plot hooks, it contains a lot of folklore and the stories and the myths behind those plants. It gives you the spark of inspiration, hopefully, for world building and for role playing, or for building the stories. But it doesn't give you any rules, and it is definitely not a D&D book.
So when you say it doesn't give you any rules, does it describe, for example, anything further than the plants themselves, like how one might make a poultice or a tincture or potions, or is it more specifically, these are the plants and this is what they can do within the setting of this book?
Okay, so from 360 pages of this book, I have 200 pages of the plant guide, which is a single spread for each plant.
Yeah.
There's 40 pages of those references. And other than that, there is this additional material. The book starts with a lore primer to botany and to herbalism and to herbal magic. So it introduces you to the whole topic, because I'm not assuming that anybody comes into this book knowing anything about botany, because it's not necessary.
Yeah.
So the book introduces you to basics of botany, talking about different kinds of leaves, for example, and their other plant parts, describing their needs and the uses and what they mean for the plant life. And after that, I'm going through basics of herbalism, which is, for example, what are the biological compounds in those plants, how you can create different kinds of poultices or ointments or infusions, what's the difference between tea and tisane, which is mostly none, other for people that like to say technically.
Well, technically, no.
Yes, technically, tea is only when it's actual tea, and tisane is when it's any other plant, but it really doesn't matter.
Functionally, and certainly at this level, it's really...
Yes. It's mostly a practical guide, and I also have, after the plant guide, the practical herbalist chapter, which comes with the actual recipes for various plants and various creation, not for plants, for plant preparations and creations, including, for example, recipes for basic poultices for wounds, or, for example, mixes and blends for herbal magic, preparations, making sachets and amulets. Again, as far as I could make them proper, they should work for a logical amount of work when it comes to magic.
Yeah.
It might work if you charged with intent, but I wouldn't really advise applying any medicine made from a book on RPG magic to yourself. I'm not a medical practitioner, not by any stretch of imagination. I'm a librarian who's a graphic designer. So
yeah. So taken with a pinch of herbal salt.
I mean, sure, recipes for homemade wine from elder should be fine, but
but it's still worth checking if it's not something that you've worked with before. So, for example, one of our patrons, he's a brewer of beer.
Oh, that's cool.
Over in Sweden, and he actually asked how accurate is the herbalism. So, for example, can he use the information about herbs to inform which herbal extracts he could put into his beers?
Technically, yes, but
research the toxicity.
Probably check. I am actually writing quite a tiny bit about grew it. I'm not sure about the pronunciation because it's not my
it's not
language. But
I know exactly what you're referring to. Yeah.
Yes, I'm talking about herbal beers, for example, made with sweet gale. Oh.
Yeah. These are the bittering agents that you have in Scandinavian in beers, for example.
Yeah. It used to be very popular until the religion changed and somebody decided to tax it heavily because the new church decided that Bog Myrtle beer creates problems with toxicity and extra aggression, and then people are having headaches after drinking it. So that's why they should drink hops beer.
Well, actually, Yoel, Yoel, if you're watching, I know he's going to watch. This is exactly the conversation we came to. We were talking about this on our Discord, and Gurix was exactly where he was coming from, among other things. So he'll be delighted if that makes it into the book.
It's already in the book.
Awesome. So we've therefore talked about the fact that realistically, we're not really informing in terms of toxicity and things like this in the book. Obviously, there are mentions of things like deadly nightshade, which everyone knows is not something that you want to, munch on as a.
Yeah, I actually counted it today, and 38 of the 100 plants have varying degrees of toxicity. And I'm also including a chapter on toxins and antidotes, which is, again, should be scientifically correct, but go to actual medicinal practitioner. If you manage to poison yourself, please don't use this guide for anything other than role playing.
I'm not going to ask you.
It should be fine, but please don't.
I'm not going to ask you to answer this, but another of our patrons actually said as a question, which herb or plant would you use to poison Phil, and why? Don't answer that, please.
I'd never. I've written a book on medicinal plants mostly. I would never do it.
No.
I know which ones are with nice hallucinations, meanwhile, too.
Which ones looks really pretty, also. On the...
deadly nightshade berries are actually very sweet and tasty.
I did not know that.
That's why they're so dangerous, because they are sweet and children would eat them. Yes. So please avoid.
Yes, even if they look pretty. On the campaign, there is a PDF which I thoroughly recommend everyone looks at. There's actually I'm trying to remember how you've described it as a sample PDF.
Yeah, it's just a collection of pages I've taken from this thing.
But I think this is really good. If you're wondering what the book's actually going to look like, it's a sample. And it is stunning. And it does remind me of all those books that we used to look at in biology class, in our teenage years. But that's not a bad thing.
I was watching them too, so.
Yeah, exactly. So there's an element of nostalgia, if you like, even for those of us who are not in a biological science or working with gardens or whatnot now. I think it's great. But going back to role playing, which of course is your one of the things that inspired this, how would you use this book? Are you a GM? Are you a player? What would be your mechanism for introducing this into a game?
I haven't GM'd anything in a while, but I used to do it quite a lot. I just don't really have the time at the moment because I need to finish my book. And we haven't played. Sorry, my dog. Haven't played anything since our quite long Shadowrun campaign, so it wasn't really plant specific. But this is mostly a book for the world builders and for the GMs who want to introduce more plants to the game. For example, there's a chapter with adventure seeds, because that is how we called it.
I love that. So I think that's great.
There's 40 adventure seeds with ideas for different adventures that come with plant-based plot hook. And actually, during the campaign, we unlocked another 100 of those adventure seeds. So there's going to be an extra one for each of the plants that are in the book. This is actually something that my partner is writing, Jakub. We already released several Wayfarers decks with adventures and encounters and plot hooks and other stuff like that. So we're used to doing that. And this book definitely is going to provide GMs with a lot of adventure ideas, because basically every single plant entry is chock full with stuff of for example, in the guide part about the U, there's a lot about how the about how U is used for necromancers and for death magic, for communication with the dead, and how this kind of wood specifically strengthens stuff like resurrection magic. Or for example, in different plants, there are notes about how rare it is, or how specifically, for example, dew collected from lady's mantle can be used by alchemists to create gold, because that's the agent that allows you to create philosopher's stone. So it's super rare and it can never be contaminated with anything. So that's another pleasant trip to send the adventurers to.
Oh, that's amazing.
So there are plot hooks and ideas spread throughout the whole book. And the rest of the material is mostly created for people who want to roleplay herbalists or magicians that are just interested in nature, or rangers, for example, just to give them this basic information about herbalism so they can roleplay with a bit more confidence. Because if you know what's the difference between infusion and extract, or potion or elixir or toxin and poison, it's just so much easier to roleplay. And this book just gives you all the basics that you need to pull it off with some kind of confidence in yourself.
I think that's very valuable. And I think if you are creating a character, it can really change quite a lot about how you roleplay that character if you understand more about who they are and what they know, even if it's just from a fictional perspective. But certainly when you're playing something like a herbalist or anything like that, having just that little bit of extra knowledge on even just the vocabulary that you would use,
it's useful.
It can boost your own confidence. And actually, if you're someone who actually role plays in character, that will help give other people around the table more confidence to rely on you as a character, particularly if you're relatively new to role playing and you haven't yet built those skills, because it takes practice. It's like anything.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's also a useful book for GMs who have somebody who wants to roleplay a herbalist at their table, because it provides them with a lot of ideas on how to use those abilities and those ideas of this character actually in game. So you have useful tables, for example, that I have table on medicinal uses, for example. So you can just quickly find whatever ails the NPC and find whatever corresponding herbs they would need to collect to actually cure them. So that makes the healer of the party or the owner of the herbalist's kits that much happier.
I can imagine
it makes it easier to drop plants in the game, because you can just roll at the 100 and tell them what's going over there.
It's a thing. I can imagine it also would be quite good if you have a character that's starting out as a herbalist and you're the GM. You can start introducing more and more things to that character as they level up. So
definitely.
It might be a really great way of actually imparting knowledge to that character by virtue of imparting knowledge to the player. And everyone learns it at the same rate, which is probably really cool if they're learning new spells or rituals or whatever. I think that could be really good fun. So question to viewers, in fact, let us know in the comments which system you would most love to use this book with. I can think of a few personally. I think it'd be really interesting in Dungeon Crawl Classic. in Symbaroum, which is my game that I play the most frequently, that I run.
Oh, it's awesome! I loved it.
It's beautiful. We're just coming up to the end of the first book. We're doing the whole written campaign, and yeah, you spend a lot of time in the forest. So
yes, I played a changeling witch there. To nobody's surprise.
Oh, we don't have any changelings in my campaign. Or witches, actually.
I'm sorry to hear that. Playing a changeling witch in Symbaroum is just...
Oh, that must have been wonderful. And yeah, this book would be perfect for that, because you can take, even if you don't use the same names for the herbs or whatnot, you could use the same effects if you really wanted to. There are plenty of in-game plants that could be transposed quite easily. So let us know, in the comments. And of course, if you're loving the look of this book like we are, then please hit that like button as well. Let's have a look actually at the campaign itself and discuss all of the pledge levels, because there are so many. I would not even know where to start. So here we are on the Kickstarter pledge.
You mean our 2 pledge levels?
Your 2 pledge levels. Genius. Absolutely genius. Let's just scroll straight down there. For $20, which is 15 British pounds, 15 pounds sterling, it's a digital version, which is not just PDF, if I recall correctly.
It is not. Actually, if you scroll down in the campaign description, there are pledges described in the detail.
Yes.
And the digital reward is basically the PDF, which is prepared with accessibility in mind. Well, will be prepared, because if the book is not yet finished, I'm at like 80% of it. But it will be finished, and it will be prepared with accessibility in mind, meaning both alt text. And I am very sorry about the noise my dog is making, but she's a big baby.
Is that one of the stretch goals? We are lovers
the
of
way
nature.
this campaign is going, I might have to come up with some ridiculous stretch goals. It might be a picture of my dog, or maybe the sound of my dog running across the wooden floor, because at this point... So yes, the digital pledge is a PDF, and it's also an EPUB and movie version, because I very much like reading on my Kindle. So I assume other people also like to change the size of their fonts and not worry about the layout. So that's what I'm going to be making. We also are including a digital version of the poster. The poster is basically more or less A2. I think it's 11 by 17 inches. Oh, that one, yes, that's the one. It contains the miniatures of all plants in the book, and their page numbers, and you can also use it as a drop die table, so you can just drop the dice wherever on that, and see what you come up with. We're including a digital version of this poster, which is about 11 by 17 inches, so about A3, I suppose. It's basically all of the illustrations from the book, with all 100 of the plants, with their page numbers and the names and the numbers. So you can also use it as a drop dice table. So you can just drop a dice and see where you come up with it. On the other side of that poster are actually the plant generation tables that I came up with, because the book also includes tables for random plant generation, including their botanical and medicinal, poisonous and magical properties, and some complications that can throw the adventurers off the scent. I mean, who wants any kind of adventure without complications?
Not me.
So that's what's on the digital poster, and the physical version is obviously the physical version of it. Other than that, in the digital pledge, we also have the Herbalist's notebook. It's just there.
There we go.
Oh, that one, yes. It's a tiny little thing that we're providing in the physical version with 2 separate covers. One of them can be colored in, because coloring is fun. Also,
I'm really bad at it.
I'm one of those people who needs to draw something or write something or just doodle during the game, because otherwise my brain starts wandering. So I'm usually sitting in Photoshop most of the time when I'm playing online. So this is for people like me. So it's a notebook with pages that allow you to create your own Herbalist primer. So you can, it comes with instructions on how to actually collect and preserve and dry plants, so you can glue them into this book. The physical version is spiral bound, so you don't have to worry about the extra bulk because it's still gonna close. And the digital version comes as a form fillable PDF, so you can write it up on the computer. It's actually one of what our backers suggested that we make it form fillable, and I think it's brilliant. So that's what I'm gonna do.
That's a really great idea. Form fillables. It's something that's completely underrated. And we were talking also about the different formats, and I think that's really great. Some people might not know. So this is a little bit of geekery, if you like, but PDF, obviously, a lot of people just read PDFs, but they can present really badly on electronic readers like Kindles and
they will,
yes, other things. So they just can be very, very slow. So having them as .mobi and EPUB just means that you can open this book on any device pretty much that you want that will display digital books, and you don't need to convert them. And as you mentioned, you can adjust the font size, and it will reflow the text, etc. So that's actually a really, really great accessible feature.
That's exactly
no one does.
Doing it.
No one does it, or it's very uncommon, to be more accurate.
It's a bit of a hassle because you basically have to do the layout twice, but it's worth it to just make the book slightly more accessible. I'd rather read it on Kindle as well.
Yeah, so you're making the product that you would want to buy, which is just great.
I did write this book mostly for myself and my cats. So, I mean, we plan to print like 500 copies and sell it post Kickstarter. So now with over 10,000 backers, this is slightly above our expectations.
I think that pretty much covers off the project, doesn't it?
I think so. Well, yes, it's basically an RPG book about plants. It has a really simple concept behind it, and I had a lot of fun writing it. I still have a lot of fun writing it over a year later since I started. The community support has been absolutely incredible, and I know I wouldn't have gotten that far without it, because I would have gotten bored multiple times. But I had my accountability group on Twitter that kept me on track. So.
And they're completely right. Thank you, accountability group, for making this happen. In terms of the product itself, as we were saying, there's two different pledge levels. There's a digital version, £15, and there's a hardcover edition for £29.40 US.
That comes with a bunch of stuff.
They both come with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, they both come with a bunch of stuff, and I'm really happy because thanks to all the people that backed the Kickstarter, we are able to, reduce the printing cost of a single copy, which allows us to create all the stretch goals. And thankfully, I have a lovely team of amazing, hardworking people that will help me to get this project to the completion, and it's just amazing. I'm very happy to have them.
Are you thinking already about your next project? Do you have something here yet? Or?
Yes.
Good.
Many books to come.
Good. That's what I wanted to hear, because it's very obvious this is going to be hugely successful and loved book. I can't wait to have a copy. We'll probably end up getting more than one, if I'm honest.
You can add on. You can add more copies through the add-ons later.
This is very likely to happen, I've got to be honest.
Well, I need about 10 to send to all my gardening aunts that don't even speak English, but they want the book, so...
Yeah, and obviously you need copies for the cats and all sorts. So,
I'm going to need them signed so they can destroy them, but personally.
got to be done.
It's got to be done.
Thank you again, Anna, for joining us.
My pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this interview, then please do like and subscribe. More importantly, please check out the product Searching Herbalists Primer at Kickstarter. And also, I mean, this isn't the only project that you guys have done, right? So over at Double Proficiency's website, you can see the other projects that have been done by Anna and the team. Oh, Anna.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's been great. Thank you. So Anna Urbanek of Double Proficiency, author, illustrator, and just all-round wizard of creativity. Thank you once again for joining us, and best of luck with the rest of the project.
Thanks.
I'm just so pleased that we could spend some time together today.
It was awesome.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye.